I worked in a toy shop for a couple of years, and as you can imagine, Christmas was a pretty intense time for all of us who work the holiday shifts. It was impossible to get that job without being an intensely enthusiastic, happy, smiley kind of person. Like 80% of the staff were entertainers or had come from some kind of performance background, and we were living the dream, so to speak. We were actually getting paid to play with toys, joke with kids, and above all, Christmas was the best time of the year for that. A toy shop at Christmas time has such a magical feeling about it, especially if all the staff have the Christmas spirit about them. Now, our store was hugely into Christmas, to the point where our smart casual uniforms even had assistants to Santa Claus or Santa's Little Helpers or other various things written in big writing over the back. This, of course, led to some fantastic interactions with kids, asking about if we'd met him and things like that. Being the only staff member who had actually worked with children for years, these questions were normally sent my way to be answered because I always had one ready. So, that's the backstory out of the way. One weekday, at an oddly quiet moment, I was on my own on the shop floor while the other staff members restocked after the afternoon rush. A boy comes in unaccompanied, must have been about 9 or 10, smiles briefly at me, and starts walking around. I gave him a couple of minutes to take a look at things before asking him if he wants to play with the new air-powered rocket launcher we had. "No thanks. I know Santa. I don't need your help," he replies flatly. This was mildly unusual, but hey, he was a pretty sweet kid otherwise. Unfortunately, I don't know much in there that would have been good for a kid his age. I figured it'll probably be his dad or someone paying for it, so I start showing him some of the limited stuff that would be suitable for some of the older kids. I show him a few things, and he sees something he likes, this big massage slipper. It's one big slipper that you put both feet into, and it has various massage settings. Not the kind of thing I'd imagine him to pick out, but a fairly cool gift nonetheless. So he asks how much it is, and I tell him it's like $20 or whatever the price was. He then instantly looks angry and frustrated. "Is that a bit too expensive, bud?" I ask, keeping the tone friendly. I don't want this kid to be upset, and he nods. So I show him some other things, and he starts getting more and more difficult to deal with. He's frowning, breathing all heavy through his nose like he's building up to some kind of temper tantrum. He starts telling me again how he knows Santa, how Santa gives toys away to good kids and doesn't ask for money in return. I just calmly explain that I can't just give stuff away for free, then politely leave him to it to browse the rest of the toys. A couple of more minutes go by. I'm just sitting by the cash register reading a book since the store is so quiet. It's only me and the kid with my manager up in the office. I remember looking up from my book, and the kid is at the register, just staring up at me with this angry look on his face. Once again, I apologize and explain to the kid that, as much as I'd like to, I can't just give stock away, otherwise I'll get fired. "Your boss is mean," the kid says, seething with anger at this point. Now, this probably wasn't the best thing to do, but since the kid was so on the money with this little statement, my boss was indeed a jerk, I just laugh. Like, not hysterically, just like this little involuntary giggle. The kid does not take this well. He thinks I'm laughing at him. "Why are you laughing at me?" he asks, practically shaking with rage. I begin to explain that I'm not actually laughing at him, but I soon realize it's not getting through to him. He just storms out of the store, disappearing among the crowds of middle-aged women that are clogging up the mall. As the afternoon draws on, the store gets a little busier and I get to actually do some work. Like I said, the work was fun, so it was never a problem. Being busy meant the hours go quicker, which means I get to go home quicker. Win-win. So I make a few sales, get to test out some of the fancy new Nerf guns we had in the store, and the weird kid eventually just slips from my mind. Nothing remotely eventful happens for the rest of the day. Right up until closing time when I'm starting my stock take and working on closing down the store. Someone is standing at the register. I look up from my worksheet and it's the kid. I give him a cheery enough greeting, hoping the kid's mood has improved, but it hasn't. Instead, it's gotten worse. "You're mean too," he hisses. "Look, I'm sorry, kid, but where are your parents?" I ask, but the kid refuses to answer. He just glares at me again. "Kid, where are your parents? I don't want to have to call mall security, but you can't be wandering around on your own, okay?" "He knows when you are sleeping," the kid mutters. I roll my eyes, but the way he says it has me really creeped out. "He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good, and you've been really, really bad." Where's your pop, kid?" I ask again, trying to remain calm. "North Pole." "Yeah, very funny, but seriously, you gotta go. The store is closing." "He's gonna climb down your chimney, covered in soot, all while you're asleep," the kid said. I didn't say a word in reply. "He'll know when you're asleep, and he'll be able to creep up right next to your bed." I reach for the store's phone, dialing the mall security short number. I try not to listen to the kid, but I can't help but hear his words over the phone's dial tone. "He's gonna stuff your mouth with coal until you choke and die." I turn, ready to scream at this creepy little brat. It's one thing to be a spoiled kid. It's another to say such threatening things to someone who's only trying to help. But when I turn around, the kid was gone. Not a sign of him, even outside the store in the emptying mall. I've only told this story a handful of times, but it never fails to creep me out. The idea of such a kid having such a skewed idea of Santa as some weird, avenging angel, having a warped view of the holiday season, never, ever fails to make my skin crawl.
4 years ago, after getting my degree, I decided it was time to leave my hometown and pursue my career. So I moved to a big city that was 9 hours away from my parents and most of my family. I had no friends there for months, and my starting salary was low because I came to the company as a trainee. I was very demotivated and I missed my family a lot. At some point I decided to go visit the relatives who lived by the coast, which was 4 to 5 hours away in the car. I didn't have a car and the buses were expensive, but my cousin told me about this Facebook group for rides between my city and another city that was nearby. I went there and found myself a ride with some university students who were just a few years younger than me. The day for the trip came by. I met them all, and in total there were 5 of us in a wide sedan. A lady studying medicine who owned the car, her boyfriend the driver, a sophomore girl who was friends with them, and a random young guy they found on their Facebook ad called Mark. It was a Friday, and people from this whole region were infamous for drinking extremely often. So inspired by the warning my cousin gave me, I awkwardly asked them, "Sorry to ask, but none of you have drunk recently or plan to do so on the trip, right?" The driver assured me that he was fully sober, and that he wouldn't have any even if the passengers did. After hearing that, his girlfriend and the other girl assured me that they wouldn't drink because their parents were very strict and wouldn't let them misbehave. Mark giggled when hearing that and whispered to me, "Women in their town are infamous for drinking a lot and denying it." The trip went on and we went around dozens of mountains. We had a few conversations about university and work, but most of the trip was us listening to popular songs from the 90s. After 2.5 hours, the driver stopped the car at a gas station as he needed the toilet. Mark decided to go with him as he wanted to get something from the store. A few minutes later, I see Mark and our driver come back to the car, each holding a 6-pack of beer. Well, actually, the driver was carrying 2. I almost freaked out, but kept my composure and asked if they were going to drink now. The driver said, "I won't until I'm done driving, but let the others and take one for yourself if you want." 2 hours later, we had left the mountains and arrived to a flat land. The sign said we were 1 kilometer away from the city. Suddenly, the car took a right turn, leaving the main road, heading towards the suburbs. The place looked desolate, and most of the houses seemed empty. I thought it was a bit weird but didn't ask anything because I assumed that maybe they were dropping off the other girl, as they probably already knew where she lived. The dude just parked the car in the yard of an abandoned house and said, "We're basically home. You guys down for some drinks?" Mark was totally down with it, but the girls kept saying stuff like, "I'm not sure, I don't usually drink." "Okay, I'll make an exception, only because we just had tough midterms." I elected not to. "How are we going to get to the city?" I asked. "You guys agreed to take me to the bus station?" They said it was really nearby, and in the worst case I could just walk there. I was more worried because I planned to take the local bus in a certain hour to get to my cousin's town, which was still 1 hour from there. They started drinking really fast, and the girls got to the point where they were trying to pee, doing a handstand against the wall. I was desperate to leave, but I didn't feel safe walking to the city because it was really dark out, and this region had a bad reputation for crime. Outsiders were specifically more at risk. There was no phone signal either, so I had to wait for these guys to see what they could offer me. They finally decided it was time to go home. I said it wasn't okay for them to drive anymore because they were all drunk and I offered to drive. However, the driver said that it wasn't up to me, as the car belonged to his girlfriend. His girlfriend refused, saying she didn't even know me, and her dad wouldn't be okay with a stranger driving her car. I understood, but we had to sort this out somehow. After a bit, the driver finally got off the driver's seat, and I assumed they would let me drive, as I was sitting in the middle of the back seat. So I asked the guy next to me to let me get off the car. The sophomore girl who was on my left did, but before I could stop her, she climbed into the driver's seat. The girl started saying, "Friend, please let me drive. It's close and there's no one outside anymore." The other girl said, "Okay, sure, but go slow, yeah?" The previous driver got into the back seat with me and confined me to the back middle seat. I was getting upset and wanted to stop her, but didn't know how to because everyone seemed okay with the idea of drink driving. My panic escalated when this sophomore girl started asking them how to turn the car on and how to operate it. "You don't know how to drive a car?" I said in despair. "No, it's my first time trying. My parents didn't let me learn." "Get down then, please. I have a license. I can get us home safely." Then the car owners told me that I couldn't decide over her car and said that it would be okay as there was almost no one on the road driving at this hour and that we would help her friend drive. The girl really had no idea how to drive. Unfortunately, this was an automatic transition car. Had it been a manual, she probably wouldn't have been able to move it. And the car moved, but in the way you would expect for it to move with a driver who'd never stepped on the pedals of an actual car before. She would hit the brake and steer the wheel too hard, drove into the middle of the road and would keep freaking out while the others yelled at her what to do. I was begging them to let me get out of the car, but they wouldn't listen. Fortunately, the streets were empty, but I couldn't help fear that if any car came up to us, we would surely crash against it. Eventually, we made it to the street where the bus station was, and as soon as they pointed it out, I asked them to just stop the car already and let me walk there, but they didn't. They forced me to be dropped off in front of it. I don't even know how I could get out of this sort of situation if it were to happen again.